Hey everyone, my wife left our son and me just last night, and this is the fourth time within the last 2 years. We've been married for 6 years. I don't really know where to begin, but I guess I'll start from the beginning of when the issue started. About 2 years ago, my wife started to change. It was very subtle, but she began to cut off people, including her own mother and siblings. She started to claim she was an independent woman and didn't need anyone, as she began hanging out with her coworker, female often, and showing up at home 5 to 6 hours after work, usually drunk. After I confronted her about not being there and causing me to do all of the housework after I got off work, she got defensive and left to stay the night at her coworker's house and showed back up 2 days later without even saying sorry. On the second occurrence, she just randomly started bringing up the past while we were talking about how life was going well and we could pay off our mortgage loan in 2 years. She started to break down out of nowhere and brought up her past and how she was raped at 13 years old by her guidance counselor, how her mother and siblings abused her, and how she had nobody. I comforted her, and she pushed me away. No matter what I said to calm things down, she twisted everything I said to make it sound like I was attacking her. She then stormed off without even wearing shoes or grabbing her phone and went to the ER at midnight. She came back 3 days later after staying at an old friend's. Afterwards, she started counseling and got on medications. She was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar depression. On the third occurrence, it was Christmas Eve and everything was going well, or so I thought, as it had been 5 months since her last episode. Again, out of nowhere, she started bringing up her past and said some awful things. She told me that she was a horrible wife and mother and that she was broken and not good enough to be with anyone. She went off on my mother, who was present, and when my mother asked what was going on, my wife pushed her to the ground and stormed out the back door. She ended up going to the ER again and was committed to a mental health center where she spent 5 days. She came back home afterward, and things went well for quite a while until yesterday. On this latest occurrence, she came home drunk as hell. She rarely drinks, and was straight up looking for a fight with me. She baited me into getting mad at her by verbally attacking me and twisted everything I said negatively. And when she couldn't do that, she just cried while telling me she was worthless. In all honesty, she had her mindset on leaving no matter what I did. She ended up leaving again to go to the ER and was committed yet again for about a week. When I called her after 3 days, she said she was doing well and couldn't wait to come home. And things seemed to be doing better. Fast forward 2 days after she got out, and she left again and blocked my number, despite me doing nothing wrong and trying to be supportive. I'm not perfect by any means. I am too down to earth and lack ambition, I guess you could say. I'm content with just being financially stable and providing a decent life for us and our son. But my wife has always had very lofty goals. She wants to move to a different state and cut off everyone. She has her mindset on acquiring a house well beyond our means and has hinted that she would go there on her own and leave our son and me behind if need be. She says she doesn't need us and can get whatever she wants on her own. The thing is, when I met my wife, she was homeless and did anything it took to get by. She hung around a lot of unsavory types because she just didn't care and lived day to day, not caring what happened. She broke free from that life when she met me and was doing well for years until, for some reason, her past caught up to her. I blame a lot of what has happened on her getting back in contact with her old best friend, who is heavily into drugs. He used to also be her old friend with benefits. He is homeless and gets by through robbery and stealing, and has been in jail a few times. I feel like maybe I'm not street smart enough for my wife. There are many times where she tried to convince me to steal items or even hit her, and I feel like I wasn't hurtful enough for her to be happy. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's all I can come up with. I feel like my wife enjoys the struggle of losing control while high, not knowing where she will sleep, not knowing where her next meal will come from, and in all honesty, she has never cared about our son. There are times when she would just bend over naked in front of our son and ask me to have intimacy with her then and there, for instance. I have truly wanted this marriage to work, but I feel like it's just pointless even bothering anymore. The first 3 times, I was heartbroken, but this time, I just feel indifferent, honestly, to the point that I feel so disillusioned that I could literally divorce her tomorrow and get into a new relationship with somebody who is the polar opposite of my wife and not even miss a step or look back whatsoever. When my wife introduced me to her mother early on in our relationship, before we got married, obviously, her mother pulled me to the side and warned me that her daughter was a severe hypochondriac. I ignored it at the time, but as each day passed, I feel like this was the truth. There were many times when my wife was just experiencing a cold or was on her period and would whine constantly until I took her to the ER, where we got nothing but a bill. I can honestly say that my wife has been to the ER at least a dozen times in just the past 2 years, and we've accumulated a lot of debt due to this, which has led to getting loans and taking out more loans to pay off loans in an endless cycle. We went from financially secure to living paycheck to paycheck at best. I'm not trying to sound insensitive by any means. I am just calling it as I see it, and I feel like I was abused. But worse yet, that our son was abused due to having to go through all of this and witness his mother in states he should never have to witness. I guess that about covers things, though. I would like to say I'm hurt over all of this, but I'm not whatsoever. All of my empathy for her ended after what I've been through while being with her. The sad thing is that without my wife's income and the amount of debt I now have, there is no possible way that I can afford the house. So I'm either moving back in with my parents or going to be homeless at 34 years old. Yeah. If anything, I'm just angry because I did everything right. And it didn't matter because I never had a say in anything, despite paying most of the bills, preparing 99% of meals, cleaning the house 99% of the time, taking our son to school 99% of the time, and pulling 99% of the weight in the relationship overall. All my wife ever did for me was provide intimacy often and spontaneously. And when it comes to our son, she gave birth to him? At least when my time comes, decades from now, I can die knowing I tried my best and I was a damn good father, better than even my own father, who was excellent, and raised my brother and me the best he could manage. I honestly pity my wife because she is incapable of knowing love and just fakes it to make it when it comes to everything. I get that her past was rough, but I feel as though she blew everything out of proportion. And from her stories she told me through the years, she always had a thing for older guys and was self-intimacy multiple times a day from a young age and called me daddy during intimacy. So I honestly just don't know what to believe anymore when it comes to her. I know that she isn't genuine when it comes to a lot of things and fabricates issues. And she has a kink for abuse and enjoys suffering, none of which I understood as it was irrational to me. But I played along just to placate her. Sorry, I guess I am rambling at this point. But I had to get all of that off of my chest before the shell shock wears off. Thank you all for your time, and I appreciate any replies that bear fruit, because this basket is empty right now. And I can't tell apples from oranges because I don't have any. To add, I've decided that a divorce is the way to go. Thank you all. Despite all the years, I feel surprisingly numb, and this decision hurt less than some short-term relationships I've had that ended badly. I guess I just stopped caring after a certain point. I put so much effort into the marriage that I'm just spent, in all honesty. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You had no business dating a 16-year-old as a full-grown man, first of all. Second of all, get a divorce. Get a lawyer to help with custody. Get proof of her hospitalizations and require sobriety and proof of good mental health before you let her back around your child without supervision. Comment 2. So you, as a 28-year-old, met a homeless 19-year-old and decided to save her, and now you're surprised it's not working out. Maybe grow a spine and stop dating homeless teenagers and expecting a housewife. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. 2 weeks ago, after my wife left for the 4th time, I decided to file for divorce. I thought it would be a straightforward process, but I was wrong. The first mistake I made was underestimating how complicated it would be to serve her the divorce papers. She had blocked my number and disappeared, making it impossible for me to contact her directly. I had to hire a private investigator to track her down, which took longer than expected and cost more money than I had anticipated. During this time, I had to juggle work, taking care of our son, and dealing with the emotional fallout. My son started acting out at school, getting into fights and refusing to do his homework. I was called into the principal's office multiple times, and it became clear that he was struggling to cope with his mother's absence. I tried to be there for him as much as possible, but it was hard when I was barely holding it together myself. One night, while going through some old paperwork, I found a letter from my wife that I had forgotten about. It was dated a few months before her first episode. In the letter, she talked about feeling trapped and suffocated in our marriage. She mentioned her desire to reconnect with her old friend, the one who was heavily into drugs. She wrote that she missed the excitement and unpredictability of her old life. Reading that letter was like a punch to the gut. It made me realize that her leaving wasn't just about her mental health issues. It was also about her longing for a life that I couldn't provide. I decided to confront her about the letter when I finally managed to get her on the phone. She was staying with her old friend, just as I had suspected. When I brought up the letter, she didn't deny any of it. Instead, she accused me of being controlling and not understanding her needs. She said that she felt like she was living in a prison and that she needed to break free. Her words hurt, but they also gave me some clarity. It was clear that our marriage was beyond saving. The next day, I received a call from Child Protective Services. Someone had reported that our son was living in an unsafe environment. I was shocked and confused until I realized that it must have been my wife who made the report. She was trying to get back at me for filing for divorce. The CPS worker came to our house and conducted an investigation. They interviewed me, my son, and even our neighbors. It was a stressful and humiliating experience. But in the end, they found no evidence of neglect or abuse. Still, the whole ordeal left me feeling even more drained and defeated. In the midst of all this, I had to deal with the financial fallout. Without my wife's income, I was struggling to make ends meet. I had to take on extra shifts at work, which meant less time with my son. I also had to dip into our savings to pay for the private investigator and the legal fees for the divorce. It felt like I was drowning in debt, and there was no end in sight. One night, while I was working late, I got a call from my brother. He had heard about what was going on and offered to help. He said that he and his wife had a spare room and that my son and I could stay with them until we got back on our feet. It was a generous offer, and I was grateful, but I was also hesitant. Moving in with my brother felt like admitting defeat, but I knew that I couldn't keep going the way I was, so I swallowed my pride and accepted his offer. Moving in with my brother was a big adjustment. My son had to switch schools, and I had to get used to living in someone else's house. But it was also a relief to have some support. My brother and his wife were great with my son, and having them around made things a little easier. I also started seeing a therapist to help me deal with everything that was going on. It was something I'd been putting off for a long time, but I knew that I needed to take care of my mental health if I was going to be there for my son. During one of my therapy sessions, I had a breakthrough. I realized that a lot of my wife's behavior was driven by her unresolved trauma. She had never really dealt with the abuse she suffered as a child, and it had affected every aspect of her life. I also realized that I had been trying to fix her, thinking that if I just loved her enough, she would get better. But that was never my job. She needed professional help, and I couldn't provide that for her. As I started to come to terms with everything, I also began to reflect on my own past. I grew up in a stable and loving home, but I had always felt like I was living in my father's shadow. He was a successful businessman, and I had always felt pressure to live up to his expectations. I realized that a lot of my desire to make my marriage work was tied to my fear of failure. I didn't want to admit that I couldn't fix my wife or save our marriage because it felt like admitting that I wasn't good enough. But as I started to let go of that fear, I also started to see a way forward. I began to focus on what I could control, like being there for my son and taking care of myself. I also started to think about what I wanted for my future. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to dream about a life beyond the chaos of my marriage. I know that the road ahead won't be easy. There will be more challenges and setbacks, but I feel more prepared to face them now. I have a support system in place, and I'm taking steps to rebuild my life. And most importantly, I'm learning to let go of the things I can't control and focus on what I can. Thank you all for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my wife I'm not in love with her anymore, even though she's been working so hard for us? We're married with no kids, which is and has been an active decision from both of us. It's the two of us and a bunch of lovely pets. None of us are dependent on each other financially or socially. We both are successful in our careers. I enjoy my job, but not as much as she loves hers. We have our own friends and some mutual friends. We rarely get into arguments, except for a couple of years ago when we had a rough patch. It was mostly triggered by our terrible financial situation, but we worked through that and came out of it stronger. We also share the same hobbies and have developed new ones together since we've met. Neither of us are close with our biological family, except for some exceptions. For the last 1.5 years, she's been working in different cities 2 to 4 hours away. So she's usually home only for the weekends, sometimes only 1 day a week, and sometimes she's not home for 2 weeks. That's rare, though. We've discussed this setup before it even started, and I supported her 100% for her pursuing her dream job, and I still do. This is only temporary. She will be getting a new position close by in a couple of months, and she will be able to live full-time at home again. I also commute to a city for work, a bit more than an hour drive, so I also spend 1 to 2 nights away from home. When she's home, she is very loving and kind. She does most of the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. It's nothing we've discussed beforehand. She just takes care of me, since I'm very tired from work usually, although she works so much more than I do. She has also told me that I won't be needing to work in the near future, since her salary will be increasing a lot in the upcoming years. She's an amazing wife and mom to our pets. We have the same preferences, intimacy-wise, and we are a perfect match there as well. She's gorgeous. Her family loves me and vice versa. When she's not home, she video calls me almost every night. She shows affection constantly and tells me that I bring so much joy to her life and that I'm the perfect husband for her, which breaks my heart every time. I almost burst into tears. I want to tell her how I feel, but I know she will be so devastated. She also talks so much about our future together and how happy we still will be. I don't know why I feel like this suddenly. I haven't met somebody new or anything like that. I just came to a realization that I'm not in love anymore. I love her so much, but maybe more as my best friend. I wish I didn't feel this way, but I have for a couple of weeks now. Can I fall in love again? What do I tell her and when? Or shouldn't I tell her yet? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. So she works harder in a better paid job and you do none of the chores? And you're worried that you are not in love with her? How much time and effort are you putting into living, caring, supporting her? Do you make dinners? Do the shopping? Look after her when she's ill? Buy and research presents? Ask her opinions and about hobbies and news? Honestly, it sounds like you are putting zero work into this relationship and surprised that it's not really a relationship. Invest in it more. Comment 2. Love is a choice. You have to choose her every day and every time. I suggest taking her out on dates. Do romantic things for her. Put in the work and you'll feel it more. Date your wife again. Never stop dating her like you're trying to court her. Don't toss away a wonderful woman and relationship because of something you felt for a few weeks. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. So, a lot has happened in the past month. I decided to take a risk and tell her how I've been feeling. I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. I chose a weekend when she was home, hoping that being in our familiar space would make the conversation a bit easier. We were sitting on the couch, our pets lounging around us, and I just blurted it out. I told her that I loved her deeply, but wasn't sure if I was still in love with her. Her face went pale and she didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she asked me if there was someone else, and I reassured her that there wasn't. She looked relieved, but still heartbroken. We spent the next few days in a sort of limbo. She was quieter than usual, and I could tell she was trying to process everything. I felt awful for putting her through this, but I knew it was necessary. We decided to take some time apart to think things through. She went back to her work city, and I stayed home, trying to sort out my feelings. During this time, I started reflecting on our past. I remembered how we met at a mutual friend's party and instantly clicked. We shared so many interests and had such a strong connection. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I think the rough patch we went through a couple of years ago took a bigger toll on me than I realized. The financial stress and constant arguments left a mark. And even though we worked through it, something shifted in me. I also thought about my own family. My parents had a rocky marriage, and I always promised myself I wouldn't end up like them. They stayed together out of obligation, not love, and I didn't want that for us. I wanted our relationship to be genuine and full of love, not just a comfortable routine. After a week apart, we decided to meet up and talk. We chose a neutral location, a cozy cafe we used to frequent. She looked tired but determined. We talked for hours, going over our feelings and what we wanted for the future. She admitted that she had noticed a change in me, but didn't want to confront it, hoping it was just a phase. I felt a pang of guilt, but appreciated her honesty. We decided to try couples therapy. It was a big step, but we both wanted to give our relationship a fair shot. The first few sessions were tough. We had to dig deep and confront some uncomfortable truths. I realized that I had been holding on to resentment from our rough patch, and she admitted that her demanding job had made her neglect our relationship in some ways. It was eye-opening, but also painful. One day, after a particularly intense session, we went for a walk in the park. She held my hand, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But then she asked me a question that caught me off guard. She wanted to know if I could see a future where we were both truly happy together. I hesitated, and that hesitation spoke volumes. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and said she needed some time to think. A few days later, she called me. She had made a decision. She wanted to separate, at least for a while. She needed to focus on herself and her career, and she felt that I needed to do the same. It was a mutual decision, but it still hurt like hell. We agreed to keep things amicable and to stay in touch, especially for the sake of our pets. The fallout from this decision has been tough. Our mutual friends are supportive, but also shocked. They always saw us as the perfect couple, and now they're trying to navigate this new reality. I've had to explain the situation to my boss and take some time off work to deal with everything. The house feels emptier without her, and I miss her presence, even though I know this is for the best. I've also been thinking a lot about my own personal history. Growing up, I never saw a healthy relationship modeled for me. My parents were always fighting, and I think that's why I've always been so determined to make things work with her. But now I realize that sometimes love isn't enough. You need to be in love, and that's something you can't force. I've started seeing a therapist on my own to work through my feelings. It's been helpful, but it's also made me confront some harsh truths about myself. I've realized that I have a tendency to avoid conflict and to bottle up my feelings until they explode. It's something I need to work on if I ever want to have a healthy relationship in the future. As for her, she's thrown herself into her work. She's always been passionate about her career, and now she's using it as a way to cope. We still talk occasionally, mostly about the pets and practical matters, but it's clear that we're both trying to move on. So that's where things stand right now. It's been a rough month, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything, but I'm hopeful that this separation will give us both the clarity we need. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my family to stop treating me like an idiot after a lifetime of proving them wrong? I'm seriously over this. I've taken care of my mom, who is 60 years old, since I was 7. She's deaf, and I pretty much ran the household, having to interpret and explain doctor's orders, Social Security, job interviews, utility bills, etc. My whole life, I still take care of her as she lives with me. For reference, I'm the only one to have graduated from a university. I've had the opportunity to live abroad in a non-English speaking country. I'm in a professional field with a license that requires ongoing professional development and do well for myself overall. Yet every question or situation that comes up, I'm treated as if I don't know what's going on. Here are 3 recent examples. My mom and I are moving to an area with a homeowners association. Somehow she's become overly concerned that her Social Security won't pay out if she lives in a homeowners association. I have no idea where she got that idea, so I try to reassure her that living in an area with a homeowners association has nothing to do with whether she can collect Social Security, but she's brought it up for the past month. Finally, I told her to call them because I'm done, and she gets told that it's fine. But she never acknowledged that I've been telling her the same thing. I got all of our utilities set up and prepared for said move. Not a big deal. My aunt, who is 47 years old, calls and asks how things are going, and I give details about the move. She gets all condescending about getting the utilities set up, and when I explain that I've already done it, she asks questions about how I did it, and then says she's surprised and that she's proud of me. Like it's some incredible feat to set up power, like I haven't done it since I was 7 every time we moved. My grandma, who is 84 years old, is having a colonoscopy done next week. I took her to the doctor's office while I'm visiting up here. We went through the doctor's orders together. I set up a checklist for her and explain every step. Then some nurse calls and flies through the directions, confusing her. My grandma hangs up and insists I got her blood pressure medication time wrong. Supposedly the nurse said 4 a.m. Her colonoscopy is at 6 a.m. I said no, the doctor's orders say 4 hours before, that's 2 a.m., and she couldn't possibly take it at 4 a.m. because she's not allowed even a sip of water after 3 a.m. She actually called them back to confirm. Like with my mom, no apology when she found she was wrong. These are just recent things. But it's a pattern that's followed me my whole life. I'm sick of it. Why am I not good enough? What more can I do? To add, holy cow. Thank you everyone for your replies. Many were very helpful and reassuring. I've answered a few comments and questions down below. I'd like to answer more, but I've unfortunately got to get to bed. I'll try to reply to more tomorrow. Almost forgot. Some frequent questions. I'm the oldest, but being only 10 years younger than my aunt, the aunt-nephew relationship kind of blurs into a sibling relationship. I don't live with all three, just my mom. My aunt was calling to see how the move was going, and I'm visiting my grandma, which happened to be at the same time that she needed someone to take her to the doctor, so I took her. My grandparents did not raise my mom to be independent, and school failed her. She can't understand what she reads very well and struggles with basic questions like, are you eligible to work in the United States? She's also extremely idealistic, which has led her to not being able to hold down a job for very long. She takes off work for headaches or will tell her boss she needs X day off on the schedule because it's her day off. And she thinks she can just tell her bosses when that day can be. I can't afford to put my mom in assisted living. It's difficult arguing with my mom because her impression of functioning family dynamics is very literally the Brady Bunch. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Are you the youngest in the family? If so, I would say there may be some of the he is the kid, what does he know mentality, regardless of how old you actually are, because there isn't anyone younger to fill that role. I would be inclined to go gray rock on them and do your best to disentangle yourself from the family. Clearly, they are all capable of figuring out what you have been doing for them. Your mom questions the Social Security thing. She was able to call and find out. Your grandma had questions about her medication. She was able to call and find that out. I would say, tell them once, suggest they can figure it out on their own. Meaning, yes, Mom, I am sure that the presence of an HOA won't impact Social Security, but feel free to research on your own. And that's that. Comment 2. From my little therapist chair. You're a caregiver and have power over persons who socially would have power over you. These second guesses are them maintaining their authority and autonomy in the guise of being active in their medical care. I don't have any advice other than make sure to take care of yourself and maintain boundaries for your own long-term mental health. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. So, this past week has been pretty up and down, and I'm not even sure where to start. First off, the move to the new place with the homeowners association happened. It was a nightmare. The movers were late, and when they finally showed up, they were careless with our stuff. I had to keep an eye on them the whole time, making sure nothing got damaged. My mom was stressed out, constantly asking if her Social Security would be affected, even though she had already confirmed it wouldn't. It was like she forgot the conversation she had with them. I was juggling her anxiety and trying to manage the movers, and it was just too much. Then, there was an issue with the utilities. Despite setting everything up in advance, we had no electricity when we arrived. I called the utility company, and they said there was a problem with the transfer of service. I had to argue with them for hours, and my mom kept asking if I did something wrong. It was frustrating because I knew I had done everything right. Eventually, they sent someone out to fix it, but we spent the first night in the dark. My mom was upset and kept saying she should have handled it herself, which was ridiculous because she wouldn't even know where to start. In the middle of all this, my aunt called again. She wanted to know how the move was going, and when I told her about the utility issue, she acted like it was my fault. She said I should have double-checked everything, which I did. It felt like she was just looking for a reason to criticize me. I ended up snapping at her, telling her I didn't need her condescending advice. She got quiet and then said she was just trying to help, but it didn't feel like help at all. Meanwhile, my grandma's colonoscopy was coming up. I had to drive back to her place to take her to the appointment. She was still confused about the medication timing, despite me explaining it multiple times. The night before the procedure, she insisted on calling the doctor again to confirm. I was so tired and frustrated, but I let her do it. The doctor confirmed what I'd been saying all along. My grandma didn't apologize, but she did seem a bit embarrassed. I think she realized she'd been doubting me for no reason. The day of the colonoscopy was stressful. My grandma was nervous, and I had to keep reassuring her everything would be fine. The procedure went well, but the doctor found some polyps that needed to be biopsied. Now we're waiting for the results, and my grandma is worried sick. I'm trying to stay positive for her, but it's hard when I'm dealing with so much already. Back at home, my mom was having a hard time adjusting to the new place. She kept saying she missed the old house and didn't like the new neighborhood. I tried to get her involved in some community activities, hoping she'd make friends and feel more at home. She went to a couple of events, but didn't really connect with anyone. She said everyone seemed too busy with their own lives to bother with her. It was disheartening because I thought this move would be a fresh start for both of us. One night, I overheard my mom talking to herself, saying she felt like a burden. It broke my heart because I never wanted her to feel that way. I realized I needed to do something drastic to change our situation. I decided to take a risk and look into getting some professional help for her. I found a local organization that offers support services for deaf individuals, including counseling and job placement assistance. It was expensive, but I figured it was worth a shot. I scheduled an appointment for my mom and we went together. The counselor was amazing. She communicated with my mom in sign language and really took the time to understand her needs. My mom seemed to open up in a way I hadn't seen before. They discussed her fears about being a burden and her struggles with independence. The counselor suggested a job training program that could help my mom find work that suited her skills and interests. My mom was hesitant at first, but I encouraged her to give it a try. She started the program this week, and so far she seems to be enjoying it. She's learning new skills and meeting people who understand her challenges. It's still early days, but I'm hopeful this will help her gain some independence and confidence. As for me, I've been reflecting on why I always feel like I'm not good enough. I think it goes back to my childhood. Growing up, I was always the one who had to take care of everything. My mom relied on me for so much, and I never really had a chance to just be a kid. I think that's why I get so frustrated when people doubt my abilities. It feels like they're questioning my entire life's worth of experience. I remember one time when I was about 10, my mom had a job interview and I had to go with her to interpret. The interviewer was skeptical about hiring a deaf person, and I had to convince him she was capable. She got the job, but it didn't last long because she kept taking days off. I felt like I had failed her, even though it wasn't my fault. That feeling has stuck with me ever since. This past week has been tough, but I'm trying to stay positive. My mom's new program seems promising, and I'm hoping it will lead to better things for both of us. I'm also trying to set some boundaries with my aunt and grandma, letting them know I need their support, not their criticism. It's a work in progress, but I'm determined to make it work. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.